Bonjour, buenos dias, what's up, sen ciao, ni hao, good morning. It's me, Mr. Jordan. Today we're going to be looking at The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, chapter 32. So we'll start with a brief recap and summary of the chapter, then we're going to get into a close line-by-line reading where we look at some direct and explicit quotes and extracts. Finally, we'll finish with short vocabulary and then put those words from the chapter into context and look at their definitions and meaning. Brief summary and recap of chapter 32 from The Handmaid's Tale. So it starts out with Offred coming in from the garden. She's just spoken with Serena Joy and they've made a deal where she's going to find another man, preferably Nick, to sleep with because they think the commander's infertile. And as part of this deal that they've struck, Serena Joy has given her a cigarette. And the cigarette is like currency or money, it's power. And in the kitchen, she asks Rita for a match. And she's been given permission to do this by Serena Joy. And this exchange with Rita follows where it's a sort of acknowledgement that Offred has a little bit more power in the house now. She's allowed to have access to a match. For a match, of course, could burn the house down. After this, she goes upstairs to her bedroom and then she recounts some of the events and the games of Scrabble she's recently had with the commander and how their relationship has progressed a little bit farther. So he's now kind of being a little more playful and boyish with her, and he's also frequently drinking alcohol and kissing her. And so she talks about this, the flavor of smoke and alcohol on her lips and sort of memories of the past that brings up. All of these things, of course, are illegal and illicit. So the commander is high enough up that he really feels confident he can get away with whatever he wants. Finally, after the conversation with the commander, there's a subtle moment where Offred's lying in bed, looking up at the white circle on the ceiling where there used to be a chandelier, where she knows the last handmaiden hung from and died. She essentially tells us she feels like she's buried under the weight. Let's get into a closer line-by-line reading and look at a few specific extracts and pieces of this chapter. Our narrator Offred tells us, "Even as I luxuriate in the future this way, rolling anticipation around in my mouth, I think of something else." So she's talking literally about the cigarette, but what she's actually imagining are all of the different sort of tastes and senses and perception that she's had taken away from her, right? She's living in this imprisoned, sheltered lifestyle where she doesn't have access to the things she used to have access to. I don't need to smoke this cigarette. I could shred it up and flush it down the toilet. Or I could eat it and get high that way. That can work too. A little at a time. Save up the rest. That way I could keep the match. So she feels drunk almost, or inebriated and full of this euphoric feeling, holding this literally a single cigarette and a match. Because she has nothing, right? In other chapters, she's sort of wandered on the possibility and dreamt of stealing something, of taking something that could be her own, because she lives in this empty, single-celled room. And now that she has these things, she has a match and a cigarette, full or overflowing with the possibilities. I could make a small hole in the mattress, slide it carefully in. Such a thin thing would never be noticed. There it would be, at night, under me while I'm in bed, sleeping on it. So there's a reference here to an allusion by Atwood to sort of fairy tales. Right? Offred's being kept in this bed like the fairy tale princess on top of 100 mattresses with a single pea underneath. Or, right, this idea of the red robe and the references to the big bad wolf or Little Red Riding Hood and other sort of grimmer, nastier tales like the Brothers Grimm and this sort of horrible outcome of people being eaten or preyed upon. I could burn the house down. And again, this really sounds like a big bad wolf idea, right? Blow their house down. Such a fine thought. It makes me shiver and escape quick and narrow. I lie on my bed, pretending to nap. Okay, she can't nap anymore because she can't fall asleep, right? She's supercharged with this energy, this possibility of violence, almost like a loaded spring. she's lying there, she starts thinking about the commander and their recent exchanges. So she tells us, sometimes, after the games, he sits on the floor beside my chair, holding my hand. So we're getting this real intimacy now, right? That he's sitting on the floor, holding her hand. She's no longer behind his desk or with all his books or in a position of power, right? He's kind of drunk, a little tipsy on whiskey, and he's sitting on her floor. You can really picture him there, right? Holding her hand, wanting to be sort of cuddled or cozy. It's a very maternal or filial relationship, right? This idea of a little boy sitting with his mother. His head is a little below mine, so that when he looks up at me at a juvenile angle, it must amuse him, this fake subservience. There's definitely kind of Freudian overtones here, I think. Some sort of Oedipal complex that he's dreaming of his own much past mother. He's way up there, says Ofglen. He's at the top, and I mean the very top. This little reference of Ofglen, this idea of him being up there, like God or religious, or the very fact that he's in the upper class and he kind of lords it over everyone as the commander. Literally, Ofglen is saying that he's a very high-ranking official in Gilead. And Offred tells us this to her seems almost unbelievable, right? That this guy who's drunk on the floor, holding her hand, looking up at her with doe eyes, is literally the all-powerful commander and high-ranking official in what's really a nasty, murderous regime. At such times, it's hard to imagine it. Occasionally, I try to put myself in his position. I do this as a tactic, to guess in advance how he may be moved to behave towards me. So she's telling us she's strategizing about these possibilities and how she can use this power to her advantage. She's only thinking like him or from his mind because she wants to be able to guess his steps ahead, just like the game they're playing, like chess or Scrabble. Not because she wants to sympathize with him or feel bad for his position. It's difficult for me to believe I have power over him, of any sort, but I do. Although it's an equivocal kind. Once in a while, I think I can see myself, though blurrily, as he may see me. Again, we have this reference, this idea that she's kind of not really there, right? Before, we've seen her as a veiled character, wrapped in gauze, or nuanced and subtle, cloud-like, and now we see that she's blurry. So I think what Atwood's doing here is talking again about this idea that her identity, that whoever this nameless woman that our narrator Offred is, she's sort of not all there, right? She's blurry. She's just the outline or shape of a person, an identity erased. Finally, we finish with her looking up, distraught, at the circle on her ceiling, so where the chandelier once hung. The round circle of plaster flowers. Draw a circle, step into it. It will protect you. So here's this idea of like a talisman or an omen or some sort of shamanic ritual or a Christian pagan ceremony, something from the past, right? Like Stonehenge, or like the circle you draw in the sand, or the circle of fire that protects you from without. From the center was the chandelier, and from the chandelier twisted a strip of sheet hanging down. That's where she was swinging, just lightly, like a pendulum, the way you could swing as a child, hanging by your hands from a tree branch. She was safe then, protected altogether by the time Cora opened the door. Sometimes I think she's still in here, with me. I feel buried. Really chilling, cold end to the chapter, as we often get in this book. Offred is on the precipice herself, right? She's always walking along the knife edge in this book, right between life and death. Just as she feels blurry and that her old identity has been killed or smothered, she feels buried, gone already, beyond the realm of the living. Now we're going to get into some of the vocabulary and context of the words from this chapter. Equivocal. Open to more than one interpretation. Ambiguous. Of a person using ambiguous or evasive language. Uncertain or questionable in nature. And this really is a description of Offred in this chapter and our narrator, right? It's ambiguous. We don't even really know her name. Who is she? Who is this woman whose identity has been disappeared or erased or rewritten or kind of blurred into the background? She's an equivocal person, an equivocal being, unknowable. Ostentation, so ostentatious, the pretentious or showy display of wealth and luxury designed to impress. This is used in Rita. Rita's kind of showing off. Rita, who has nothing, who has even less than Offred. She's chewing an ice cube and she's offering one to Offred. And that symbol, a small gesture, is her way of being ostentatious, even though she has nothing. Importunate, so persistent, especially to the point of annoyance. She feels this way. She feels like she's become an annoying, whiny, sort of beggarly person. She doesn't like what she sees in herself. And it comes from a Latin word meaning to be inconvenient or unreasonable. Offred's feeling that way, that relying on others has made herself feel importunate. Stolid or stolidity, calm, dependable, and showing little emotion or animation. It comes from the stultus, to mean foolish perhaps, and I think it's Offred admitting a little bit that she feels foolish or silly, like she's possibly been used a little bit. Now she's at the mercy of Serena Joy and the commander Fred. She's sort of stuck in this game between them. She's been made to look foolish. Thanks so much for watching. That was chapter 32 of The Handmaid's Tale. Leave any comments or questions below. Happy to answer any of your queries. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you liked the video, and take care until next time.